Um, so welcome back to our mixed bag musings. I, this summer, was doing some reading for various things, and I came across an interesting quote from St. Augustine. I know those of you who've been here before have heard me railing against him quite a bit. And so I thought I would throw him a bone and tell you all that, every once in a while he says something that I like. So I wanted to throw this out there as potentially a new slogan for our class. St. Augustine, in a sermon that he gave, once said, and this is Latin, I don't know how to speak Latin, so I'm just going to butcher this. Si enim comprehendis, non est Deus. And that means
something without God.
If you understand
You
it,
understand.
it is not God.
Okay.
So that made me feel a little better because we've been asking all these questions and they're very complicated and we don't really get a whole lot of answers that are very definitive. But Christians have felt like that for a long time, and St. Augustine is, one of the most famous and smartest of all the early church fathers from the earlier medieval period. And his perception is that if it's too easy to understand, then it's not God. So I liked that. I thought that gave me a good chuckle, but also kind of helped me to ground myself as we head back into this mind melting thing that we do once a week together and have fun wrestling with these questions.
Well, yeah, have a little humility, I guess, huh?
Yes, right. So for March, who has not come to these particular sessions before, and Ben, we haven't seen you in a while, just kind of a reminder about how this class flows. So we're asking our theological and practical Christian questions, and we assign each question to a week, and we ask the question, and we I like to start out with talking about assumptions. So if the question itself has any assumptions, then we talk about those. If I bring some assumptions to the question about how it should be addressed or kind of the methodology, I want to make sure that we are being honest about the fact that these questions can be answered in a variety of ways from a variety of perspectives, and not everyone's going to agree on even how we go about this. And so I want to throw out kind of show my work and give you that background. So that's usually what we do at the beginning of class, and then we get into kind of the content and look at what the Bible has to say about the question and wrestle with it a little bit. And then often, usually, but not every single time, I kind of give my answer to the question if it's not already obvious from what we've talked about, and offer up opportunity for disagreement, obviously, and questioning what I have to say. And then we kind of wrap up. So that's what we have been typically doing with these classes, and it seems to be working well. If you've come up with any new questions this summer, or any questions come up as we talk about things, you're always welcome to add to our list. I told everybody we'll just keep on going as long as there are questions to talk about. We'll keep adding them to the list, and then when we run out of questions, we'll find a new topic to talk about. But so far, we haven't run out of questions, and I've got enough, I think, now to take us into November. So, that's great. We can just keep on going forever if everybody's got enough questions to keep it up.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I wanted to toss out there today was yesterday, I found out that our new Bishop Megan, and one of the new assistants to the bishop, Pastor Amanda, both of them really like getting invited to midweek Bible studies in the synod. And so they told, Bob was on a conference call with all the deans of the conferences yesterday, and they said, please invite us, tell people that we would love to come to their Bible studies. So I didn't know if this group would be interested in inviting the bishop or assistant to the bishop, Pastor Megan, to join us. I figured I could, throw out the list of questions and offer up that they could stop by anytime that's convenient for them, that they're interested in the question. How does everybody feel about that?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
I think it will change the entire conversation that you're having.
Yes, that's why I wanted to talk
It's
to you all
like,
about
it's like
that.
going out to, like Bill Brown and I go out to breakfast and we go out and we have our conversation. And when we invite, Pastor Bill to go out with us, the entire conversation is totally different. So,
Yes, that's why I wanted to ask you all
Yeah.
what you think about that.
Well,
So-
they probably wouldn't come every time, would they?
No, it would just be once.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fine, just once.
I hope they have other things to do.
Yes. All right, well,
Uh,
I can put that invitation out there and, maybe they won't
Yes,
be able to
yes.
come. Maybe there's a standing meeting at our time or something, but,
Yep.
I thought it would be interesting to, there's Linda. Oh, Linda's coming.
Oh, good.
So it'll change things up on that day, but I think it'll be interesting to, I've been in a couple of meetings already with the new bishop, but it's different to do something that's not getting to know you or business of the church, that we're talking about God and our faith, and allows you to get to know people a little bit differently. So I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, Yeah.
Okay.
we don't want to be closed-minded, Katie.
No, we don't. I think that's a prerequisite for this class, isn't it?
Yes. Oh,
All right, Linda's on her way, she says. So hopefully she'll be with us in a second. So moving on to today's question, we've got, is God male? This was the question as it was received. Often I kind of reframe the question or ask a little bit broader question so that we can have a deeper conversation, but this was the question I got. And I thought this was the best way to present the question. So today's question, is God male? So starting with some of the assumptions that the question has, and some of the assumptions that we have, the approaches that we'll take here. Obviously, this question assumes that there is such a category as male that can be assigned to entities. Whether or not they apply to God or not is up to debate and conversation today. But that's kind of a place that that we start. And I think that because of the way that we understand how gender works historically in our society, I think that the question kind of assumes that the other option for God possibly is, if God is not male, then perhaps God is female. So I wanted to start just with some of our assumptions about gender, about how do we describe these two genders that we kind of assume are the binary, are the two options in our culture. And so we're going to try something new today with our Zoom. And if you can't figure out how to do it, it's okay. You can just speak out loud and I can put it on. But Zoom now has this interesting little tool called Annotate. So if you get your menu up where it's got all your information about muting and video and participants in chat and all that, there's a button that you can click that says Annotate. And when you click on that, you can draw on the screen or type on the screen, and everybody can see what you're typing. So like I can get on here and I can type, and then all of you can see what I typed.
Huh. I don't know where that is.
No, I can't find it either.
I don't either.
Well, I can do it. So what we'll do here is I'd like to hear from you about, when you see these two words, male versus female, what are some of maybe the adjectives that pop into your mind? What are some of the assumptions that you make about what it means to be male or what it means to be female? And it doesn't even necessarily need to be your opinions, but kind of, what our society thinks of these two.
Oh, okay.
This is hard for me because society's changed so much about male and female. When I grew up, the man was the head of the household and that kind of thing. Whereas now, that's certainly not. We understand it not to be the case.
Mhm. But I think those things are good to put, we can
Yeah.
put
But
all
you
of that
still
kind of
want,
stuff in.
okay. Males are stronger, people used
Yeah.
to say.
Stronger.
physically.
Yeah.
Um,
So that makes females weaker.
Mhm.
If you're going by that. Yeah.
But perhaps other ways too.
Yeah.
well, men are supposed, yes,
Yeah.
men are supposed to be stronger emotionally and not just physically. Women are, I always think of hysterical, hysterectomies.
Yeah.
Well, and to go with head of household, when males were the head of the household, then the females, what the men said went. The females didn't have a choice, I guess you would say.
And
Yeah, we had a conversation about that a couple of nights ago at my house. And when I first got married, I couldn't have credit in my name or a credit card, or I couldn't sign anything. It was all, I was totally
Yes.
dependent. And I was told that wasn't true, but it was true. And it wasn't until much later that women received that thing, that ability.
Yes, you always had to have someone, your husband, sign with you. Or
Yes.
If you weren't married, a parent or whatever. Yes, that's
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Yeah. Your husband or your parent.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can't think of the words, but men are, when you're talking about aggressiveness, there's like a positive term for men and a not so positive term for women.
Oh,
I
yes.
can't think of the words I'm thinking of. I'm trying to
Um,
think of.
If you say aggressive about men, it's not a put down. If you say it
Yeah.
about women, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't think that that's gone away yet.
Mhm.
Women, even if women are assertive, they're a threat.
Yeah.
Well, I can think of what word I want for that, and I think I'm just gonna put it,
I was thinking it.
as we all know.
That's the truth.
Thank you, Katie. Hmm.
Anything else?
There's the kind of obvious motherly for females.
So what do mothers?
It was
Nurture.
nurturing, caring, loving. Yeah.
Some of them.
Well, this is the
Well, and on
Right.
the other side of it, males were not supposed to be nurturing or caring.
or they can't cry.
There was something wrong with them if they were, right, exactly, if they cried.
I'm so glad that isn't true anymore.
Me too.
See, I feel like men got trapped into their roles just like women did, and it's hard to get out of it.
Mhm. Oh,
So-
my.
There's been a little bit of mention of parenthood and of, of kind of how our own relationships with our own parental figures influence perhaps the way that we understand these things. But how do you think your relationships or people's relationships in general with their parental figures affect their view of God? Not just of, what it means to be a man or a woman, but also their understanding of who God is.
Well, I think, and I don't even know what times this was, probably when I grew up, or maybe a little later, more men did not go to church. It was just the moms taking the children, so that the males, their sons, as they grew up, didn't feel that they had to go to church because their dads didn't go to church. So there was a lot of that during different times, I think, that happened.
Yeah, I have a good friend who grew up with an abusive father, and she had lots of trouble with her vision of God. Anything as God as male was just really hard for her. And she said she could never quite understand me because I grew up with a good father, and I didn't have any trouble with male or female or neither one for God. And she just couldn't. She said, she would always tell me, she says, I hate you for that you can do that. She said, because I can't.
Yeah.
So.
And that's so true. I grew up with a father that wasn't really abusive, but was never there emotionally, physically. He was always at work. He was always doing something. So for me, even the Lord's Prayer saying, Our Father, I cannot relate God. I mean, I know God is a loving God, but using the word father is tough because I didn't feel my father was loving. So there's always that pull for me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me too. I grew up in an abusive home and with a stepfather, and I didn't really know my real father, and my stepfather was really abusive. And so I just rejected that. And I only think of the spiritual part of God. I don't think of God as gender.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of limiting to God to put gender there.
Absolutely, I agree.
So I don't know. I just don't even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jesus is a different thing. We know he was a man.
Yeah.
But God is a spirit along with the Holy Spirit. That the Holy Spirit isn't a gender either.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too today. You're just teaching my whole class for me today. Yeah, so I think I think our experiences, and especially our experiences of men and women that we, especially from our childhoods, is often very forming for us, formational for us in these kinds of conversations. But just kind of keeping in mind, the question. Oops. Let's clear our drawings here and move on. No, stop. Annotate, go away. There we go. All right, now we can move on. Keeping in mind the question, where do these assumptions come from? That, if you grew up in an abusive household and you didn't have a good father, then maybe your assumption is that, God is what a father is supposed to be. I know that my father was not who a father is supposed to be, but God is my real father, and God, behaves in such a way that it's the right way. Or maybe you reject that notion, you don't like the idea of God as a father because your experience of father was so negative. And so you maybe use that word when you're praying the Lord's Prayer or reading the Bible, but even subconsciously, you're kind of substituting that for something else, maybe mother, if you had a good mother, or some kind of spiritualization of the word, something like that. But all of our assumptions about these kinds of conversations around gender and around the gender of God come from our experiences, right? Our culture, the way that we're raised. And so we have to kind of keep that in mind too when we're looking at the Bible and what the Bible has to say about God, because the authors of our biblical texts are affected in the same way. We don't, our Bible doesn't often humanize the characters to enough of a degree that we can say, gosh, maybe the person that was writing down this story, was physically abused by their father. And, how does that affect the way that they talk about God and the way that they portray God or portray Jesus or portray the Spirit in this writing? The authors of these texts are influenced by their culture, even by the assumptions that are made by their language, that we kind of have this formula in Christianity that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And I was just talking to Bob about this the other day, that some churches now use kind of roles: creator, redeemer, sustainer, or something like that. But that doesn't really get to the heart of it in the way that Father, Son, and Holy Spirit does, because it's become part of our cultural language. That when we're talking about the Trinity, we're not talking about the roles of the Trinity. We're talking about this particular entity that we know as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so how do those assumptions, how does that kind of enculturation affect the way that we see who God is? And of course, also, their personal experiences, our personal experiences of, how these biblical authors were parented. Maybe they themselves were parents at the time or before they wrote these things down and edited them and put them together. And so all of these things influence what our Bible has to say about God and God's gender. And so it's important to spend at least a little bit of time understanding some of the background. So I want to start us off today with talking a little bit about, I put it in quotation marks, the science of fertility in the ancient Near East. And this seems like it's maybe a little bit off topic from Is God Male, but we'll get there eventually. So obviously maybe not so obviously, but in the ancient world, there was not an understanding of how human conception worked from a scientific standpoint, from a scientific point of view. I didn't look up, when gynecology became a thing. It's a Greek word, and I actually have a book from ancient Greece called The Gynecology, and it's all about, it's very interesting. It's translated into English, and it's very interesting to look at what they thought, was how childbirth worked and things like that. But in the ancient Near East, there was a lot of association with agriculture when it came to human fertility. They used a lot of metaphors, that using words like seeds and soil. And the reason for that is because they believed that men were the ones who provided the seed, what it took to create a human. And then the woman receives it. The woman provides the nourishment that it needs to grow, but doesn't provide any of the necessary elements for the child to exist. And so a seed and soil works really well for this, because the seed is the baby tree, right? All it needs is the soil with its nutrients and its water and its darkness and its warmth to break it open and make it start growing and turn into a tree. And so that is the understanding, that when we look in the Bible and it says, his seed was implanted in her, that's a literal understanding of what's happening. That the man provides the child, maybe teensy weensy baby or something, and it grows inside of the soil of the woman's womb. So So that is the literal understanding of how this works. And so we start to really see already, the understanding of kind of creator on one side, the one that created this person or this thing. But then the opposite side of that is the nurturing. And so the idea that when you create something, you're just making it to exist. But then there also has to be an entity that is there to nurture it, to help it to develop and grow. And those things are considered to be distinguished from each other. Those are considered part of the dichotomy of male and female in the mind of an ancient Near Easterner. And so that's important, when we're thinking about God and how God is represented and spoken about in the Bible. And then a second thing that I think is important for us to keep in mind is that there was some sense of understanding that how a mother behaved during her pregnancy would influence the success and the health of her pregnancy and a healthy birth child. So they kind of, it's not that they didn't understand at all that there was any connection, the way the mother ate and spent her time, and whether she was able to rest and kind of have a stress-free life, or whether she was in the middle of a war or something like that. They understood that those things had an influence on the pregnancy. But there's also a lot of reliance on, depending on the culture, God or the gods related to fertility and successful pregnancy. And this again goes back to that agricultural association in those metaphors. When you say that when you've had a bad harvest, you say it's because God or the gods are not present in the land. If God is absent from the land, then it is infertile for that particular year. Therefore, if a woman is barren, it's because God is not present. God is angry with this woman. God has done something to this soil to prevent it from growing its fruit. And so you can see, some of the misogyny, some of the source of blaming women for not being able to be fruitful, not being able to, fulfill their role, so to speak, in the society. Because if God is absent from that woman's life, from that woman's body, it's because she did something wrong, right? It's because God is punishing her, God is rejecting her in some way. It's not, the seed isn't the problem. The soil is the problem. Just like when we, so we have a bad harvest, nobody ever says, oh, well, were your seeds bad? They say, oh, well, your soil doesn't have enough nutrients, or you're not watering enough, or you're watering it too much. The assumptions that we make in agriculture are kind of the same even still today to a pretty heavy degree. So questions or comments on any of that before we move on? Okay. So next I have some Hebrew grammar for you. I know you were really excited about this part.
Yahweh.
Yeah, Yahweh.
Yahweh.
Recognize that one. So
Very special.
thinking about what the Bible has to say about this question of is God male, we have to start with Hebrew grammar, because the way that grammar works in Hebrew is different than in English. So the very first three words of the Hebrew Bible are Bereshit bara Elohim, which means in the beginning or at the head of things, God created. And it's interesting because Elohim is the word that we translate as God in our Bible, but it's actually a plural masculine noun or plural neutral noun. And so the singular for this word is El, and that would be the masculine singular. But we don't refer to God as El, we refer to God as Elohim in the Hebrew Bible. And so already there's something interesting and different going on in terms of the grammar of Hebrew here. that God is referred to in the masculine or neutral plural rather than as in the masculine singular. And it's not just that, but bara, the verb in this sentence, is in the masculine singular. And so there is technically here, there is mixing of, there's inconsistency. If I wrote this sentence in Hebrew class when I took Hebrew, and the professor didn't know that I was just copying from the Bible, I would get marks off because my object, my subject and my verb did not match. They have different pluralities to them. But this is what it says. And so, we kind of already have to grapple with the identity of God. Who is God if God is actually God's? We don't know. We're not entirely sure what that means.
Or, as you said, L is masculine. Would it be both then? Not
Yeah, we don't
neutral,
know.
but
We
it's
don't know.
both.
So when
Yeah.
you use a
Interesting.
plural, when you use a plural in Hebrew, like with many languages that have
Right.
gender for their nouns, when you use a masculine plural, that can refer to a masculine group. So if you have one man, then that's masculine singular. If you have one woman, then that's feminine singular. When you have two or more women, then that's feminine singular. But if you have 1,000 women with one man, then you use the masculine plural for that. Because if there's a man present, then you use the masculine. And so, and then there are also neutral verbs that don't have any gender indication. And so this word could indicate that it's referring to a masculine group of gods. It could refer to a neutral group of gods. It could refer to a mixed group of female and male gods. Or it could just be some kind of strange borrowing from other languages that do have multiple gods in their system. But now that we've got monotheism, we just refer to the one God that we understand to be, singular male as Elohim, in the same way that others refer to their gods as Elohim. And we don't know. Nobody really knows. Some Christian scholars have kind of usurped this and say, well, the reason why that the word for God is plural here is because it's referring to the Trinity, that there is, more than one person being referred to here because we've got Father, Son, and Holy Spirit already at the very beginning. I have a problem with that. I think that's kind of a bad faith effort to usurp, to supersede the Hebrew original, intentions of these authors. But I don't have any ground to reject that person logically any more than they have any ground to decide that what they have to say is definitely the answer and nobody can refute it. So there's a lot of interesting, complicated stuff going on here. The other word that I put up here for you is Yod-He Vav-He, Yahweh. And this word is even more interesting because we don't actually know what this word is. We don't know what it says. Because in the Jewish tradition, the commandment not to take the Lord's name in vain was interpreted, and the idea came out of that it's best, I've not been circling my stuff here. It's best to not speak the Lord's name so that you never take the Lord's name in vain. They didn't put any of these are called the dots and tittles. These are the vowels. All these little dots and lines are the vowels in Hebrew. And so when you see the word Yahweh in the text, there are no vowels because nobody knows how to put the vowels in. So in English, we've decided to put in an A and an E to make it Yahweh. In German, they didn't pronounce things that began with an I, so they would change it to a J. And so they pronounced this word Jehovah. Same word, Yahweh and Jehovah. But nobody knows how this is actually supposed to be pronounced. What we do know is that it has something to do with the verb to be, so is. And this character here at the beginning, this yod, indicates that it is a masculine form of the verb to be. Specifically, feminine forms of nouns and verbs are never used in the Bible with words related to who God is or what God is doing to indicate God's gender. But these more masculine words are used. But then we've also got the masculine plural in Elohim. So all of this kind of stuff is all going on, and we don't even think about it because we translate into English and we don't have verbs that have gender to them. Our verbs are verbs. Katie goes just like Ben goes. We don't have to worry about figuring out whether Katie is male or female before we write down goes, because they're the same for everybody. So, comments, questions about that? You don't need to understand everything that's going on here to understand the point. All right.
I think, Katie, you also have to remember what society these writers were in. A
Yes.
very masculine dominated society.
Yes.
Okay. Another assumption.
Right.
Mhm.
Assumptions that we're adding on. All right. So I want to look at Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 27 a little bit, because this is the first indication we have that could give us any hints about the gender of God. So the New Revised Standard Version, which is the translation that I prefer, says, "Then God said, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them." So that's what the translators of the NRSV decided to make this sentence, these couple sentences say. But in Hebrew, it has a slightly different translation if we translate it literally. And it's, you don't translate literally in Bibles that are supposed to be for reading, because it's too hard to read something that is translated literally. It's too stilted and difficult to parse out the grammar. But if we were to translate this literally, and I'm going to skip over the part about the dominion and the birds and stuff like that, but it says, "And Elohim, he is saying," so there's a masculine singular verb, "he is saying, we shall make a human in our image," like it just says here, "as a likeness of us." So that kind of follows along there. And then we skip down to the third last line there. "And Elohim, he is creating the human in his image. In the image of Elohim, he created him. Male and female, he created them." And so the human is created in the image of Elohim, but there's some confusion about what is being created in the image here. Is it just the male that's being created in the image of God and the female not? Or are both the male and the female both created in God's image equally? What do you think?
Well, he made Adam first.
Not in this story.
So why have we hung on to that? How come that translation doesn't fit with this?
So we've got two different creation stories. We've got this one, and then we've got the one that goes into more detail about creating Adam and creating all the animals, and Adam names all the animals, and then they can't find a good companion, so then God makes Eve out of the rib. That's the second creation
Just
story.
a second.
Yeah.
So in this story, they're both created at the same time. And it says, in the image of God, he created. So
Well, does
Well,
Is
that,
it like, is it like in the case of certain animals where they have both male and female characteristics? No, not characteristics, but the ability to procreate by themselves.
mm, so you're thinking maybe maybe there weren't actually two at the beginning here. There was just one, and it was kind of an androgynous figure.
Well, if they were created in the image of God, how many gods were there? I mean, I'm getting really confused here, Katie.
Think of Augustine.
Well, we
Okay.
have to think of I'm more fixated on the word that's translated as image,
Uh-huh.
whether this is a physical image, a mental image, a spiritual image, which we all have. And I think it also says he created him. It doesn't say he created him at the same time, but just that he created him. I find no difficulty with this in the other creation story. But it to me, it comes down to image. What do we see as the image of God?
Mm-hmm.
Because it talks about him being a spirit through the garden. And my personal feeling is that's the image that he gave to them, is the spiritual image, not the physical image.
Yeah. So what does image mean?
Yeah,
And
that,
is
yeah.
it possible for women to claim that image for themselves, or is it
Image
only for men?
themselves too? Yes.
And
yes.
that's kind of the question
Yeah,
here. And then
yeah.
why? Why is it only for men? Is it because God is a man, or is God male, or is it something else?
well, I think God is God, so he can be both. He can be male and he can be female. Male, maybe the male characteristics and thoughts at one time, and then female nurturing. We know he's nurturing, which we put with the female characteristic. That's how I look at it, that he's God, so he can be both.
Okay. Another
Or neither.
possibility. No, go ahead, Karen.
Or neither.
Or neither.
Well,
Yeah.
neither, but then neither wouldn't go with what they're saying here.
Yeah.
He created them
Depending
in
on
his
what
image,
image
male and
means.
female.
Well,
Right.
it's the thing about language being so limited. Because you say a word like male or female, and then you have this image in your head, and it's so limited as to what God really is.
Yeah. So
And-
complicating things.
And I wonder, and I'm not going to live as long to know, but the generation that Bob and Katie and those after them, younger, will view male and female differently than what we did. So will it evolve to more of what the Bible was saying as far as male and female?
That's a
Do you
good
know-
point. That's a
Okay,
good-
I didn't know if you understood what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Because
think we need,
our generations are different, and
Mhm.
it's tough. It's tough to dismantle what I was brought up with. I think I think I'm doing a good job of it, but it's hard. You have to kind of leave that stuff behind. That's not the way it is anymore.
But we still have this, even as you're speaking this now, and I'm just going to pick on you because you happen to just do it, Marge.
And I'm your daughter-in-law.
You said, you said he could be male, he could be female.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
just the language that we use assumes a certain gender for God, right?
yeah,
Right. Well, when I was brought up, everything was he/she. you always had to do that. Well, now they don't. Now, I don't even know what they're teaching the kids, but they just use one pronoun for it. So that's why I was kind of saying it that way. We said he could be anybody. And now they're saying you have to do he slash she slash, I don't know, it. Is that part of it too? I'm still learning. But we always said he could be either one. That's how I was brought up with writing. But
That's the English language, but it still slants towards the masculine.
Yeah,
yeah, it did. And it certainly did then.
and it still does today for sure.
Yes.
So, no, I'm not gonna, answer any of these things. We're just gonna keep on piling on the complications. So I wanted to share with you some more. I'm not going to show them to you in Hebrew, but I wanted to share with you some more Hebrew words because the way that this question has been kind of addressed this is not a new question. This is something that has been a struggle of the people of God for a long, long time. And so I want to share with you 3 words that have feminine grammar associated with them in Hebrew that are associated with God. So the first one is Shekinah. Shekinah means dwelling or presence, and it refers in the Hebrew conversation about God. It refers to the presence of God, and it is grammatically feminine. Like I said, all of these words are going to be grammatically feminine. This particular word doesn't actually appear in the Bible itself, but it is used widely in rabbinic literature that kind of is the work of Jewish scholars to understand the meaning of the biblical text. It's called the Talmud. And the Talmud kind of has been added to over the course of time, but for as long as the Talmud has been a thing, this word has been used to describe the presence of God. And in the Talmud, God is present in 6 ways. And so just keeping in mind that this word Shekinah is feminine, and then looking at the 6 ways that God is present. God is present in the tabernacle and the temple in Jerusalem, which is kind of obvious. That's, where God is supposed to be. God is present while a person studies the law. And so God is present to nurture faith and growth in that relationship with God. God is present whenever 10 or more people gather in prayer. So God is there responding to need. God is there whenever 3 or more sit as judges. So God is there in the building of community. God is there in cases of personal need. So for consoling and comforting and healing. And God is there in a happy marriage, nurturing family and relationships. It says that if the Shekinah, without the Shekinah in your marriage, it is believed that fire will consume the marriage and the people in it. That without the Shekinah, without the presence of God, your marriage will burn up in a variety of ways. And so God's presence is there to nurture family and relationships. So when we think back to our list of characteristics that we associate with male or female, what do you notice about a lot of this?
The presence. God is always there.
So in all these different ways, God is there. And what kind
Right.
of role is God playing?
Nurturing.
Mm-hmm.
But aren't some of these things, the way God is present, available, at least in sometimes historically, only to males?
Yes. So historically, men studied the law, men gathered in public prayer. Men sat as judges.
We're allowed in the temple.
Mhm. But then, so these are the ways that God is present and kind of limited in a lot of ways to men. But look at the ways that God is acting. We think back to our lists of, what is male and what is associated with male and what is associated with female. These words are nurturing, responding, consoling, comforting, healing, building community, relationships. Those are the
Yeah.
words that we associate more with female, right?
Right.
And so it's interesting to me that, like what Linda said, a lot of this is limited to spaces that men get to live in and women don't. But the way that God is behaving in these situations tends more toward what we would consider the stereotypical female role,
Mhm.
right?
Here's both.
Ah, Ben,
What?
what was that?
Well, for me, in my simple approach to belief, God the Father is male, Jesus is the Son, and the Holy Spirit is the female. Emotionally, I'm talking about this, the Comforter. And that's,
Oh, okay.
that's the way I divide God.
Okay. I'm wondering if this isn't even a challenge to that dichotomy. That if this is what is happening in these male spaces, and God's presence is there
Mhm.
embodying these feminine, quote unquote, feminine qualities, then isn't everyone supposed to embody these same qualities, regardless of their gender identity, regardless of their gender and sex characteristics?
Yeah.
So kind of, blurring the lines, I think, in terms of what it means to be male and female. All right, let's see if I did this right. Nope, I did not. Okay, so I've got two more words, but I messed up my PowerPoint, which I knew I was going to do. So this was supposed to go away, and then I was supposed to have more words under there. So the other words that I have under there are ruach, R-U-A-C-H, which is Hebrew for spirit. Jews don't have the same understanding of the spirit as Christians. There's not a trinity, obviously. But the phrase is used in a similar way to the Shekinah in the Talmud and in other Jewish writings. They prefer to use the word Shekinah because it avoids any reference to the name of God. You don't need to say the Spirit of God in order to refer to it. You can just say the Shekinah. And it also differentiates with Christians, because when you say spirit in the context of the Old Testament, then Christians are going to assume Holy Spirit. This word is also grammatically feminine. So the Spirit of God is feminine. And then the third word is chokmah, which is spelled C-H-O-K-M-A-H. And it means in Hebrew wisdom. It refers to the role of God in guiding us toward developing ourselves in positive ways, growing in our faith, growing in our knowledge, nurturing wisdom, nurturing us in developing a moral grounding, things like that. Things, interestingly, that, are typically kind of reserved for the woman or in the household. Those types of things are what is taught to young children by, your female Sunday school teacher, right? Traditionally. So again, feminine. So our Bible, we've got these male, a lot of these male grammar indicators. We talk about God as he is, he is, he is. But even our Bible has, different things to say, has kind of some mixed up understandings of this. And we can't just assume that the Bible says that God is male. I'm going to kind of cap that off with looking at Psalm 131. It says, "O Lord, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. But I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with its mother. My soul is like the weaned child that is with me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time on and forevermore." So what kind of gendered language do you see here when it comes to how this person is relating to God?
I don't know when I have the same difficulty when I try to do a description of God. But for me, gender is always, when I talk to the Lord, it's always what I'm doing at the time. If I'm looking for comfort, I talk with her, with the Holy Spirit, to breathe in and help me in comfort. If I have desires and needs, then I talk to my father, my daddy. He is my daddy, and I talk to him that way. And that's basically what I do. We don't have the language for it, Katie. You know that, to do this. And they didn't in the times of the Bible either, and they even understood less than what we do. So, as I say, depending upon who I'm talking to, my gender is either male or female.
And I think because we can't explain it with words, and then you see these metaphors like a weaned child with its mother,
Yes, yes, yes.
because they kind of go beyond words, the metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
But I would think it was a male child.
So if it's the male child, it's interesting. So I find the first part of this psalm, when I'm thinking about the gender stereotype that we spoke about earlier. Men are supposed to be big and bold and self-assured, self-determined. But this person is acknowledging there are things that are too great and too marvelous for me. When we talk about, your stereotypical captive, man who's captive to masculinity, toxic masculinity is the phrase that we use nowadays. That kind of admission is not permitted, right?
Yeah,
To be a man.
yeah.
But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. So this idea that God is bigger, but God is also my mother. God is both of these things at the same time. I think that compared to God, I am acknowledging God's superiority. So when we think about, those gender stereotypes, that's kind of on the masculine side. But then we've got the weaned child with its mother. God is a comforter. God is the one who brings hope and healing and nurturing. And so these things start to really blur together with this.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So any other thoughts on any of that?
I just don't think we can. I think we deceive ourselves when we try to put God in a box.
You are correct.
It's when I pray to God, I don't think one way or the other. It's God and he can do anything. So I don't divide it into male or female. I mean, that's just me. I just don't think about whether he's male or female. I think he's all, he's both.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
So that's a good segue here though, because we can, I think we can say that. And I think that's fine. That's right. We don't want to think about God from the perspective of male or female. But why does this question matter? Why are we even thinking about this when, you know, the obvious answer is pretty much already right in front of our faces? And I think,
Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I just say, for me, it's not necessarily a question that matters, but I've been in women's groups where it's a big question that matters. People coming from, well, Christian, but different parts of Christianity, and just the way they were raised and in their households, and for some of them, it got in their way of having any kind of relationship with God. So and language was something that really mattered to them if they were going to try to envision a relationship with God. Yeah, that was something I didn't really understand from my own place, but I could feel there was a lot of pain expressed from those women.
Right.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times, you know, when we're talking about questions like, you know, what is the gender of God? People like to kind of dismiss it. They like to say, well, gender is a social construction. It's not a real thing. It doesn't actually exist. We just created these categories and shoved people into them. And so it's not real. So why can't we just dismiss it? Why can't we just throw it out? And I think that, you know, we can say that. I agree. I don't think that there's such a thing as gender. We like to think that we can define people's genders based on their primary sex characteristics, perhaps. But when we get down into the nitty-gritty of what that biology actually looks like, then it gets very gray and very complicated and way less clear than the stereotypes and the assumptions might suggest. But I think what's harder is that these stereotypes, these assumptions impact people, and they impact, you know, the way that people engage with the world and the way that they engage with God. Gender is not a real thing, but it's very real for us as people who live in society, for people who, you know, have to deal with the implications of how we think about and relate to God and to one another from within a system that does heavily emphasize gender and gender roles. So we've got, no, go ahead, Karen.
I just want to say, you know, one of the things that happened with the length of Jack's illness was that I had to take on more and more what I would call masculine roles in the household. And the interaction with workmen that I had to hire to come to the house, it's like they were always hesitant whether I really meant what I said, or, I mean, it caused a lot of trouble. And I know it was because I had to take on that role, and they didn't relate to it that way. They kept wanting him to be able to say something. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it hasn't gone away. Yeah. And then I think to myself, well, am I capable of doing those things? You know, because I had to doubt whether I was even capable of taking on that role. Mm-hmm. I think it makes a real difference to how we see ourselves and others. And this blurring that's going on with the young people, I think they've got the right idea. I just think we need some new language to discuss it. Mm. I'm sorry, I broke in.
No, that was helpful. So this passage from Galatians, Galatians chapter 3, is often used to support this idea of just, well, gender doesn't matter. Gender's not important. You know, say whatever you want, use whatever language you're comfortable with. But the Bible tells us very clearly, as many of you as were baptized into Christ have clothed yourself with Christ. There is no longer Jew or Greek. There is no longer slave or free. There is no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus. And if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise. So the idea of dismissing these differences, dismissing these categories, dismissing these experiences and the way that they impact us psychologically, whether it's the person who's receiving you as somebody who is taking on a role of authority in deciding about, which air conditioning unit to put on in, or whether it's the person who is trying to make those decisions and feeling insecure and invalidated in that because of the way that they're being responded to. So I don't think that that's what this passage means. I don't think that it is what it's attempting to get at. I think that what this is an indicator of is the struggle in the development of our Bible, in the writing by the people who wrote the Bible, between kind of two ideas. The idea that, God has done a new thing. God has created a new world in which all of these ways that we find to differentiate each other, to otherize each other, to oppress each other are no longer relevant, no longer valid, but they still have to live in the societies that they live in.
Mhm.
So we've got this tension between the new reality in God versus the social norms of the context in which people are living. And so that's where I think we get, some of the places in our Bible that say women should not speak in public discourse or, in the worship services, or wives be subservient to your husbands, these types of things. Because the early church is trying to navigate this tension. They don't have anybody to look back at to help them figure this out in the way that we do, at least in the context of Christ. And the changes that he brought, and how they navigated this, the way that they wrestled with this is codified in our scriptures, for better and worse. We've got passages like the one I just read. We've got passages like Romans 15, where Paul, speaks about female deacons and female leaders and female readers of his letters, and clearly just assumes that, of course, there are women who are important in leadership in the church. But then we also get places like in First Timothy where it talks about how, women are not to speak and are to be subservient. And you can see, how these two ideas kind of press against one another, especially in the high stakes world of being a Christian in the first century, in the second century. If this is literally life and death we're talking about. What matters? What is essential to being a Christian? What is worth dying, literally dying for? Because if you are living a life that is countercultural to such a degree that people are going to notice, then the consequences of that are not going to be good, because you are not accepted for who you are. If you're gonna make a stand using the way that you live your life, what is worth making a stand over is putting women in positions of authority that they don't have in the rest of the culture. Is that worth dying over? Is that the hill on which we as Christians are going to die? Or do we die on different hills? Do we accede to that? Do we say, okay, well, maybe we'll keep the women quiet so that we look a little bit more like the world around us? And over the course of time, these decisions were made and kind of codified into the Bible, codified into the way that the church operates. And so how we read our Bible matters. We talk about that all the time in this class. Just because it's in there doesn't mean we have to maintain those same social norms in our culture now. We have to read the Bible culturally and understand where it's coming from so that we can translate.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just translating from a language we don't read into a language we can read. It's translating the intentions. It's translating the good news that was written to people in a particular time and place going through certain things. how do we translate to that to us, what we're going through, the problems we're facing, the cultural assumptions that are made in our world, and how our behavior is going to be judged against that, which is going to look very different than it would have for a first century Christian Jew, for example.
Mhm.
So I think for me, and now we're starting to get into Katie's opinion on these things. I think that for me, what the Bible does is, outside of these, proof texts that do and don't tell us, that God is male, or these proof texts that do and don't tell us what the role of women is in the church, I think that the Bible offers us a radically alternative option to the model of what it means to be male, whether that title is applied to a person or to God. And that model has been in place for millennia. It's present and very obvious even within our Bible. Think about our violence in the Bible class and the assumptions about, what is the goal here? To take what I can get from me because I have power, I have authority over you. That is what makes me me, is what that is saying. I am taking what is not mine because it belongs to God to give, and I am claiming it for myself or for my interests. But the Bible gives us a different way. Mark 10:42-45 says, "So Jesus called his disciples and said to them, 'You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. But whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as ransom for many.'" So I think that in a sense, in a way, when we talk about, is God male? When we ask the question, is God male? I think that we're asking a bigger question because of what we associate with maleness. We associate violence and domination and power and authority with that which is male. And the love and forgiveness and grace that God represents through Christ in our Bible is contrary to that. It gives us kind of a brain melt. It's cognitive dissonance. And I think in a way, many Christians, and even ourselves, when we think about the kind of people that we don't just like, that we disagree with, we still cling to the idea that this idea that that Jesus is sharing here, this is an aberration. This is temporary. This is an impermanent kind of holding back of God's violent and masculine tendencies. This is God using love and forgiveness and grace to make available a way out of addressing and facing that violence. But eventually, many believe, God will revert to true form, will violently punish those who refuse to respond to that love and forgiveness, will kind of snap back into what we believe is the box that God belongs in. That this love and forgiveness thing is just a temporary thing, that this whole thing that Jesus brought is not the way that things should be. And I'm not saying that anybody thinks this overtly, but I think that's the way we act when we talk about God punishing the wicked. I think that's what we mean deep down when we say that God is male, or when we act like God is male, even when we are not careful with our language and use language that assumes that God is male, these are the kinds of things that are stirring in our souls, even though we don't know it. And so that's why I think that this question matters a lot. I found a quote that I think kind of gets to the heart of this a little bit. It's from Beth Daly, who works at theconversation.com. It's kind of an online blogging article type of thing. She says, "What people value in their God, they value in life. One sees greatness in power and control and the right to exercise violence when one is in the right. The other sees greatness in love and compassion, in confronting violence and abuse of power." And so I don't bring this up because I think that you need to, get rid of your idea that God is male and replace it with the idea that God is female. I don't bring this up because I think that our definitions of male and female in this way are correct. I bring this up to challenge the whole system. Is maleness about power and control and violence and nothing else? Is femaleness about love and compassion and confronting violence and abuse and nothing else? No, of course not. When we bring it up there, and ask that question on the face of it, and just make it bald and put it out there. But in what ways are we behaving in that way? And in what ways are we attributing certain stereotypes to God in the way that we think about God, even without thinking about it? And in what ways are we exposing to others and to ourselves, if we are really honest with ourselves about it, what we value in our God and in our lives? And so our personal images of God, how we talk about God, how we visualize God, form the way that we live our lives, form the way that we interact with other people. And so I think that we have to avoid assuming that our images of God define all of who God is. I'm not saying that every single image that you have of God is bad, but at minimum, we need to resist the impulse to, quote unquote, nail God down. Sorry, that was not a good pun for God and Jesus.
In a box.
Too soon. We have to resist that impulse to nail God down, to define God, to put God in a box, and keep the humility at play that is required to know that how I perceive God, how I visualize God, what my image of God is not even a fraction of who God really is, of what is possible with God. And so, our ways of interacting with God, the ways that we visualize God, the things that you've all been sharing about how you talk to God and the language that you use and or don't use, all of those things are not bad. We are limited humans, but to maintain the humility, to maintain the awareness that none of those things are actually right at the end of the day, because we don't have the capacity to understand God, I think is essential when we're thinking about God and the implications of our image of God for the way that we treat others and for the way that our world continues to develop. All right, sermon for the day over. Comments, questions, dissents.
So in a way, this paragraph right here gives me some understanding of the people who are doing things to increase their power and control, and they're using violence to do that, and they believe they're in the right. It all comes down to how they see God and what they value in life. And
Maybe.
but I think they're dead wrong. I mean, I don't know how that fits in with the love and compassion, and how do you merge those two things?
You can't.
Mm-mm.
That's what
Yeah.
I thought. That's what I thought. So which one is the right way?
Well, I know what I think.
I know what I think too.
I think that if you see greatness and power and control and the right to exercise violence when you're in the right, I don't think that you're worshiping God. I think you're worshiping yourself.
Right.
But that's my
I agree.
Amen. Amen. I agree with that.
so coming back around to our original question. Is God male? No, of course not. But why did we bring up this question? God is also not female.
Right.
God is also not transgender or non-binary or any other gender identity.
Right.
God transcends gender, and so God can relate to us where we are in our gender identity. But what is God?
Oh, that's so good. That's a good thought.
What is
God.
God?
God is God.
Beloved, let us love one another because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. God's love was revealed among us in this way. God sent the only Son into the world that we might live through him. So God is not male. God is not any of these things. God is love. And so
Love.
how do we use our context, use our identities like maleness or femaleness or transgenderness or non-binariness to reveal that love in the world? I think it's the question that we should be asking ourselves. And to be careful about the language we use. How we talk about God matters. I was thinking about this the other day. When I was in seminary, a professor gave a lecture. It lasted almost 2 hours. And at the end of the lecture, which had nothing to do with gender, the professor said, I would like all of you to notice that I just spoke to you without stopping for 2 hours. And never once did I refer to God with using male pronouns or any other kinds of words that referred to God as male. You didn't even notice, but it matters that I did that. It takes time and energy to do it, but I have not referred to God as he in an unintentional way in probably 10 years. I started when I was in seminary because I realized how important that was for people who need to not hear that. I still really struggle with how to, we talked earlier about Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I still use that that phrase because it's ingrained in us as Christians to a degree that he and him are not. But I don't use pronouns for God, and I don't have to use weird, awkward grammatical methodologies. I don't have to say God's self or something. You can train yourself just like you learn a new language, just like you learn new vocabulary. You can do it. It's hard, but it's achievable, and I think it's important. And so I would encourage you to consider that. Consider just trying occasionally even to reduce the number of times that you refer to God in gendered ways, and how that might help your spiritual life and your relationship to God to change and grow, because it does get into your head in ways that you don't even think about, I think.
So is there another word that when you say Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is there another word to put there?
Some people use creator, redeemer, and sustainer, but I don't think that gets at the same thing, because those are roles, not
Right.
identities. Some people, just will kind of intermingle. Father sometimes, mother sometimes. But it's hard to
I'm not good
know.
with-
It's hard to
Yeah.
know. I too, do not have a good relationship with my father, and so I don't have any kind of personal and emotional connection to that formula. but it is ingrained in my religious identity. And so it's hard for me to find an alternative that is meaningful in the same way to me.
Yeah, because
do you
even if you use Abba, it's still Father,
Yeah.
How do you handle the Lord's Prayer?
Yeah. So I still say Our Father when I pray the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah, some people say or think our Father and Mother.
Yeah.
And they say the Lord's Prayer.
But I'm not
Somebody's-
comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with the father, mother thing.
What bothers you about it?
Because I don't think God has a gender.
So are you comfortable with the father part, the way it's traditionally?
No.
said? So
I
you just
I'd
get
just
rid of the
rather
whole
not
thing.
say it at all. I usually
Yeah.
skip the first part.
Our God who art in heaven. Yeah.
Yes.
Entity in the sky. Hallowed be your name. No, it's hard, and it's challenging and it's threatening, but it's also, I think, worth it because it expands our understanding of who God is. It brings us out of our own heads. It helps us to realize the limitations, not just of our gendered language for God, but all of our language for God. Everything that we say in these classes, I have to remind myself that everything that I say is at least a little bit wrong because I can't know the real
Right.
truth, the real
Right.
reality.
And I think the church has used that gender thing, in negative ways historically, to keep women in their place. And I mean, it's only been 50 years in the Lutheran Church that women have been able to be pastors.
Mhm.
That's a pretty short period of time. And you ask yourself, why weren't they allowed to be pastors? Because in the Catholic Church, they come out and say, or they used to, that women are not made in the image of God.
Yeah.
That's pretty major theology.
Yeah.
To put that out there. And, when I was growing up, I didn't think about it. My brain didn't work that way, but I know other people in my age group did. The fact that I grew up not being able to even think about being a pastor, or I couldn't be an acolyte in church.
Mhm.
I just accepted that as that's the way it is. But what does that say about the way I accepted myself?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I still struggle with, like, every once in a while, somebody will tell me again, Katie, why aren't you ordained? Katie, why aren't you a pastor? And I think the truth is because I was raised to believe that I couldn't.
Yeah.
And I got to a point in my life where my theology changed, my understanding changed, and I could say women can be pastors, but I still don't think that, deep down, I can honestly say to myself, you can be a pastor.
Mhm.
And how different might my life look if I had those options and that openness and that full experience of, personhood in the church.
Yeah.
We don't know.
That's a shame.
And even now, 50 years into this, there are a lot of churches who would never even consider calling a female pastor.
No.
That is true.
So it has deep implications for individuals and society. And the church did step up about inclusive language and in the hymnal and other areas. But I think it's like you said, people don't notice it unless
Yeah.
it's a Christmas hymn that you're used to singing and all of a sudden it's changed.
Yes. Then people start complaining.
Who's fooling with our Christmas carol?
Yes.
And some of the more contemporary songs don't make that effort.
Yeah.
That always bugs me a little bit. When I sang in at one church I was at in our band, I was always the person who said something about the pronouns or the language, and I always got the rolled eyes, like, oh, that's Linda.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for the most part, they dismissed it and went on and sang the song the way it was.
I know we're not supposed to mind that. And, you
I
know,
mind
maybe-
it for, I mind it for other people. I don't mind it for myself, I guess. I mean, I don't prefer it, but it doesn't bother me to the extent that I know it bothers other people, and that's why I think about it more.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's hard, and especially now as a lot of this kind of stuff starts to expand even more. Brothers and sisters in Christ. What a lovely way to include everyone and make everyone feel like they're part of the family. Except what about the people who don't feel like they are a brother or a sister because they don't feel like they are male or female?
Yeah,
So we have to come
Yeah.
up with new formulas.
don't identify that way, yeah.
We have to, and we do it not because we're trying to be politically correct or because we're trying to, you know, we're trying to signal our, you know, superiority to anybody else, but because we know that there are real humans out there who feel excluded, who feel otherized and dehumanized by the language that we use. And that's
We
why I
want them
try hard.
Yeah, we want them to feel loved.
Yes. If what it takes for someone to feel loved is for me to start my letter with holy and beloved ones of God instead of with brothers and sisters in Christ, of course I'm going to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah. I got one of my Facebook friends, and I'm going to put that in quotes, sent out a post the other day that said, all these people who think there's something else than what they were born, and we're supposed to think they are too, and then they pretend to be something that they're not, and we're supposed to pretend that too. And it went on through all these different things. And I thought, well, you know, I always thought you were okay, but you're not. And so I unfriended her. And I think, what a twisted way to look at things, you know? And I wasn't the only one that unfriended her. There was a whole bunch of people, but I just don't know how people's thought process works to get that twisted up. Those are all people. They're people that hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And they're suffering because they're left out. And I know what that feels like because I'm a woman, and I've felt that lots of times. So I think we need new language.
All right, Karen, you get on that. You can reveal the new English to Karenese dictionary at our next meeting next week, okay?
I think it's really hard. I don't know how to do it. And I always forget all the letters. So I can go LGB,
Oh, those letters.
and then I can't remember the rest of them. And so
Me too.
it's not that I want to leave anybody out. It's just too long.
Mhm.
But the attempt and the humility and not dismissing it, you know, people who say, well, that's just too long, I can't do it. That's dismissing, that's, you know, dehumanizing through inconvenience.
I know.
To laugh at yourself and say, oh gosh, I try, you know, that I think is the sign of somebody who is, you know, part of the process in the positive side.
Mhm.
Well, I was okay until they kept adding in. And then I guess I just don't pay any attention. I don't care. What
It's called a slippery slope.
they're just people to me.
They need new language that's just all inclusive and you get it all with one word.
Yeah, no. What could that be?
People.
All
People.
people, yes, all people. The song "I Will Make You Fishers of" used to be men, like,
Mhm.
because I've been teaching kids choirs for a long time, and when we changed it to "Fishers of All," you know, everybody, all people. But it was still hard because men would slip out.
Yeah, yeah.
That's true.
All right.
Not anymore, but it used to be hard when we were changing. Sorry, didn't mean to
Okay, all
interrupt.
right.
No, that's okay.
Okay, got a scoop.
Help us to get out of here.
Yeah.
So next week, our question of the week is, how should Christians interact with non-Christians? So prepare yourself for
I'm gonna
that.
be gone, but I'll be back the week after.
Okay. we will allow it.
Okay.
You're excused.
I'll be interacting probably with some non-Christians, so I'll see how that goes.
You can let us know when you come back. All right, well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Katie.
Hope
Thank
have a
you.
wonderful
Good to
Thank
be
you.
back.
Bye, everybody.
night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.